You know that moment when you send a message that actually means something. You type, erase, retype. You stare at the screen, waiting for those 3 little dots to move. And then, nothing. The silence hits harder than rejection. It's not just that they didn't reply, it's that they made you question your worth. You start asking yourself, did I say something wrong? Am I not enough? Should I try again? Stop right there. Because the more you chase, the further they run. Every message you send from desperation doesn't pull them closer. It teaches them how easily they can ignore you. And that's where most men lose themselves. But a Stoic man doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't chase validation. He knows his silence carries more weight than 1,000 explanations. So from this moment on, you don't react, you respond. Not with words, but with control. Because power isn't in what you say, it's in what you can hold back. In this video, I'll show you exactly how to reclaim that power. How to shift from being ignored to being unforgettable. These are not tricks. They're principles drawn from Stoicism, psychology, and self-respect. If you master them, you'll never beg for attention again. Are you ready? Good. Let's begin. The moment you hit send, you hand over control. You might not realize it. But every time you wait for a reply, refreshing, checking, rereading your message, you're silently giving your power away. You're saying, my peace depends on how they respond. And that, right there, is the trap. The truth is, silence doesn't hurt because of what it means. It hurts because of what it reveals, how deeply we've tied our worth to someone else's attention. When they don't reply, it's not the silence that destroys you, it's the thought behind it. Maybe I don't matter. But here's the paradox. The more you try to prove your value, the more invisible you become. Because desperation, no matter how hidden, is always felt. People can sense when your energy says, please choose me. Now let's flip it. Imagine a man who never begs. He sends a message once, calm, clear, real, and then he continues with his day. He doesn't sit there refreshing his screen, because his self-worth doesn't hang in the balance of someone else's attention. That is the shift of power when you stop needing a reaction to feel seen. Most men chase because they believe silence is rejection. But silence is not rejection. It's information. It tells you everything you need to know about where they stand and who you are to them. A Stoic man doesn't fight information. He accepts it, learns from it, and adjusts accordingly. Let's get brutally honest. If they can ignore you easily, it means your presence became predictable, and what's predictable loses value. That's why when you double text, when you try to fix the silence, you don't bring them closer. You train them to devalue your energy. Stoicism teaches us this. Control what you can. Accept what you can't. You can't control their reply, but you can control what version of yourself they experience. So instead of reacting, you respond with poise. You show, not tell, that your attention is earned, never owed. Picture this. You walk away without saying a word. You don't delete your messages. You don't spiral into overthinking. You simply redirect your focus back to what matters: your mission, your craft. your inner calm. Days later, they'll open your chat, expecting another message, but all they'll see is silence. That silence, it will echo louder than any apology or explanation could. Because the man who doesn't chase is rare. The man who doesn't explain himself is unforgettable. And the man who stays grounded while others seek attention, that's the man who commands respect. Remember this, attention is like sand. The tighter you grip it, the faster it slips through your fingers. But when you let it rest, steady and still, it stays. That's the energy of calm confidence. You don't need to demand a reply. Your silence is your reply. Your indifference is your statement. Your restraint is your signature. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." So the next time you're tempted to send another message, pause, take a breath. Ask yourself, am I acting from confidence or from fear? If it's fear, stop, because every time you act from fear, you reinforce the illusion that someone else controls your peace. But when you act from confidence, you reclaim what's yours. You teach the world how to treat you not through your words, but through your boundaries. Your absence becomes a mirror. It reflects their behavior back to them, forcing them to confront the emptiness they created. And make no mistake, they will feel it. The moment you stop reaching out, something shifts. They start wondering, why haven't they texted? Did I lose them? Are they over me? That's when curiosity replaces comfort. And in that moment, the balance of power quietly changes hands. But here's the truth. You must remember, you don't do this to manipulate them. You do this to discipline yourself. You're not trying to make them chase you. You're learning to stop chasing anyone. Because a man who chases nothing attracts everything. So, stop explaining yourself. Stop rehearsing what you'll say next. Stop measuring your worth in unread messages. Instead, let your silence carry the message. Let your absence remind them of your presence. Let your calm make them question their chaos. The man who stays silent doesn't do it to punish. He does it because his peace is sacred. And when you finally learn that when you truly stop seeking validation in someone else's reaction, you become unshakable. Because power isn't about having control over others. It's about mastering yourself. And once you do, you'll never be ignored again, because your energy, your stillness, your presence will speak for you. There's a kind of silence that breaks men, and another kind that builds them. The first comes from fear, from waiting to be chosen, from needing a reply to feel alive. The second comes from strength, from understanding that your response doesn't need to be loud to be heard. That second kind of silence, Stoic silence, is what separates a man who chases validation from a man who commands respect. Let's get something clear. Silence is not ignoring someone. Silence is self-control made visible. It's you saying without words, I value my peace more than your inconsistency. When you stop reacting emotionally to every delay, every unread message, every dry response, you step into a power that most men never experience. Because silence isn't passive. It's active restraint. It's you choosing not to hand over your emotions every time someone withdraws their attention. The Stoics understood this perfectly. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." In relationships, that principle becomes this: if it's not calm, don't send it. If it's not self-respecting, don't chase it. When you practice silence, you aren't punishing them, you're protecting yourself. Because every time you stay quiet, you give yourself space to see clearly instead of react impulsively. Think about it. When someone ignores you, they expect emotion. They expect frustration. They expect you to double text, to ask questions, to explain, to chase. That's the pattern they've seen 100 times before. But when you do nothing, when you meet their coldness with composure, it unsettles them. They start to wonder, why didn't he respond? Did he lose interest? Did I go too far? And suddenly, the one who ignored you becomes the one questioning themselves. That's the paradox of Stoic silence. You win not by reacting, but by refusing to play their game, because every time you react, you give away a piece of your peace. Every time you beg for attention, you reinforce that they have something you lack. But when you stay still, calm, and centered, you remind both of you that you were never the desperate one. Picture this: you're holding a glass of water. The more you shake it, the more it spills. But when you let it rest, it reflects perfectly. That's what silence does to the mind. It steadies your emotions. It allows you to see what's real, not what fear tells you. Silence also filters. It shows you who's genuinely invested and who was only entertained, because people who value you will notice your quietness. They'll reach out, check in, and want to rebuild the bridge. But those who don't, they'll vanish into their own noise. And that's your answer. No drama needed. Understand this: when you withhold your energy, you shift the power dynamic. You teach the world how to treat you. You remind them that your presence is earned, not assumed. And in that space of silence, something profound happens. You begin to hear yourself again. The thoughts that got buried under overthinking start to surface. You start realizing, maybe I was giving too much. Maybe I confused my availability for value. This realization hurts, but it's also your awakening. Because every man must go through this stage, the point where silence stops being painful and starts being peaceful. Here's the truth: your silence is your teacher. When you stop trying to fix what's not reciprocated, you free your energy for what truly deserves it. And slowly, you evolve from needing validation to radiating self-respect. That's why silence works not as a manipulation tactic, but as a reflection of your maturity, because people eventually feel the absence of energy that once centered on them. They feel it when your attention is no longer theirs to take for granted. And that quiet realization hits harder than any message you could ever send. Let's be real. Staying silent isn't easy. Every instinct inside you wants to break it, to text again, to fix it, to prove something. But that's exactly where your discipline is tested, because anyone can react, only the strong can wait. The Stoics believed that control over emotion is the foundation of true freedom. You don't become emotionless, you become unmoved by what doesn't deserve motion. You don't stop feeling, you stop leaking energy. Silence is not emptiness. It's presence. It's awareness. It's you saying, I'm here. I see what's happening, and I choose not to let it shake me. It's dignity made audible through stillness, and the more you practice it, the more others will feel it. They'll start noticing your calmness, and it will confuse them. Because in a world addicted to overreaction, your restraint becomes power. They'll wonder, how can he be so calm? Why isn't he chasing? And eventually, they'll understand you don't chase because you don't have to. That's what Stoic silence does. It redefines the way others perceive you. You no longer speak to prove your worth. You embody it. So the next time your message gets ignored, don't fall apart. Take a deep breath. Put the phone down. Let your silence do the talking. Because in the end, silence reveals what words cannot. Who values you? Who doesn't? And, most importantly, how deeply you value yourself. And when you can sit in that silence without needing closure, validation, or reaction, you'll realize something powerful. You were never waiting for their reply. You were waiting to remember your own worth. When you stop chasing answers, you start creating questions. There's a simple truth about human nature. People crave what they don't fully understand. The moment you become predictable, you lose their curiosity. And when curiosity dies, attraction follows. This is why most men lose power when they try to fix silence. They send long paragraphs, explain themselves, or try to force connection through logic. But emotion doesn't respond to logic. It responds to mystery. Think about it. When someone gives you everything all at once, your mind relaxes. There's nothing left to uncover. But when someone gives you just enough to make you wonder, your attention stays locked in. That's what the curiosity shift is about, transforming your energy from pursuing to pulling. Instead of saying too much, you leave space. Instead of explaining, you imply. Instead of chasing their attention, you make them seek yours. This isn't manipulation. It's psychology backed by Stoic restraint. Because curiosity grows in silence, not noise. The art of the breadcrumb. Imagine this. You've sent a thoughtful message. You meant every word. But there's no reply. Hours go by. Days maybe. Your instinct to send another text to remind them you exist. But that instinct is the enemy. So here's what you do instead. You drop a breadcrumb. A breadcrumb is a message that doesn't demand attention. It invites it. It's short, mysterious, impossible to ignore. For example, you just crossed my mind. Interesting timing. That's it. No over-explanation. No emoji. No desperation. Just enough to make them think, what timing? Why now? What made them think of me? The human mind hates open loops. When we hear half a story, we need to know the rest. That's the invisible force. You're triggering the need for completion. Here's another. I saw something that reminded me of you. Hard to explain. Now the silence reverses. Before, you were the one wondering what they were thinking. Now they're the one wondering what you saw. That's the power of curiosity. It shifts the dynamic from pursuit to intrigue. You've stopped chasing, and now they're the one mentally chasing you. Why it works and why most fail. Most people overshare. They spill their emotions into paragraphs, hoping to spark empathy, but what they actually spark is boredom. Because in a world full of noise, brevity is mystery. When you say less, your words weigh more. That's Stoicism in action, measured speech, emotional restraint, and perfect timing. A breadcrumb works because it's incomplete. It gives the other person something to think about, not something to respond to. And thinking is where emotional attachment begins. But here's the key: you must drop breadcrumbs without expectation. You're not fishing for a reply. You're planting a thought. If they respond, great. If they don't, you stay silent. Because the real power of the breadcrumb lies not in the message, but in your detachment from it. Your silence after the breadcrumb amplifies the effect. They start checking their phone, replaying your message in their mind, trying to decode it. And in that space of uncertainty, your value grows. Examples of controlled intrigue. Here are 3 types of breadcrumb messages you can use, each one designed to trigger curiosity while keeping your frame intact. 1. The open loop. You'd actually be surprised if I told you what I just realized. It implies something big but reveals nothing. They'll wonder, what realization about me, about us? 2. The emotional echo. It's strange how one small thing can remind you of a whole person. You're reflecting emotion, not begging for attention. It feels personal but calm, and it makes them feel something. 3. The silent compliment. You know, there's something about your laugh I finally figured out. This one is powerful because it's personal yet incomplete. It triggers curiosity and nostalgia at once. Notice something. Each of these leaves space. You're not over-explaining, you're letting their mind work for you. And that's the Stoic mastery in communication. You speak less, but every word carries impact. The Stoic philosophy behind it. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." In the modern world, you can adapt that. We have silence, and words use silence twice as much. Stoic men don't talk to be heard. They talk to create meaning. And silence, when used, deliberately becomes the most powerful form of communication. When you stop sending emotional paragraphs and start sending purposeful sentences, something changes. Your energy feels rare. Your words become valuable, and people begin to realize your attention is not a right, it's a privilege. That's what makes them reach out again. Not because you begged, but because your restraint reawakened their curiosity. The discipline of not explaining. Here's where most men break. When the person finally responds, "What did you realize?" or "What reminded you of me?" they overdo it. They dump the entire story, trying to sound clever. But the art is in continuing the mystery. Keep it light. Keep it vague. For example, hard to explain through text. "I'll tell you someday." That's all you need. Now, instead of closure, you've created anticipation. And anticipation is far more powerful than attention. Let's be clear, breadcrumbing isn't about playing games. It's about reclaiming control over your expression. It's about speaking like a man who doesn't need to be understood immediately because he knows who he is. Stoicism is the art of restraint. And restraint in conversation shows emotional command. The more emotionally stable you are, the more magnetic your presence becomes. Because while everyone else floods the world with words, you master the silence between them. So the next time you're ignored, don't double text. Don't explain. Don't chase. Drop a breadcrumb. Something simple, intentional, unbothered, and then disappear again. Because when your words carry peace, people can't help but seek the source. And that's when the shift happens. They start wondering, replaying, missing, remembering. You stop being the one who begs to be seen and become the one they can't stop thinking about. People lose interest in what they can predict. It's human nature when someone already knows what you'll say, how you'll react, or what you'll do next. You stop being exciting. You become routine. Predictability kills attraction. But unpredictability, controlled unpredictability, reignites it. Let's be honest, most people, when ignored, follow the same script. They text again. They ask, "Did you see my message?" They justify, apologize, or explain. And that's why they stay stuck, because the person on the other side knows exactly how the story ends. So what happens when you break that pattern? What happens when you suddenly stop being predictable? You pull the rug out from under their expectations, and in that moment, the power shifts entirely. This isn't about playing games. It's about showing that you've evolved beyond the emotional script they wrote for you. When you surprise, you reclaim control. Imagine this. They've ignored you for days. They assume you'll cave, that you'll follow up like always. But this time, your silence lingers. And when you finally send a message, it's not emotional. It's unexpected. You know what? Never mind. 4 words. But they hit harder than a paragraph ever could. Why? Because it forces them to question what they missed. It flips the dynamic from you chasing their attention to them chasing closure. They start thinking, what did they mean? Never mind about what. Did I just lose something important now? Their brain is working for you. You've broken the rhythm. You've made them feel something. Again, confusion, curiosity, even regret. And here's the key. You didn't do it out of anger. You did it out of clarity. Because your worth no longer depends on whether they reply. It depends on how calmly you move when they don't. The psychology of disruption. Humans are wired to notice contrast. We notice when something changes. So when your behavior shifts from emotional to composed, from predictable to unreadable, it forces their brain to re-evaluate you. They thought they had you figured out. They thought you'd always chase, always explain, always show up. But now, your calmness feels foreign. And what's foreign becomes fascinating. Unpredictability wakes people up. It's the same reason movies use plot twists. It resets your attention. When someone doesn't know what's coming next, they can't look away. So when you stop giving predictable reactions, you stop being background noise. You become the signal. Examples of controlled unpredictability. Here are a few simple lines that demonstrate this energy, each one subtle, but disarming. Wow. Didn't expect that from you. Guess I'll have to find someone else for this idea. You would have been perfect. That's interesting. Not what I imagined. Though, each of these is short, calm, and slightly ambiguous. You're not starting drama. You're not begging for a response. you're creating tension, because tension creates curiosity, and curiosity leads to engagement. Notice the pattern. Every line ends without closure. You say just enough to make them think, and then you pull away again. That's what Stoic unpredictability looks like. You stay grounded, yet impossible to read, and that balance is magnetic. Timing is everything. Here's what separates a man who's stoic from one who's reactive. He waits. You don't pull the rug immediately after being ignored. You let silence breathe. You give them time to notice your absence. And then, just when their comfort sets in, you drop a simple, unexpected message. That's when it hits. Because unpredictability without timing is noise. But unpredictability with discipline is power. You're not trying to make them chase you. You're showing that your energy moves on its own terms. The Stoic mindset behind unpredictability, Seneca once said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." Most men waste time explaining themselves to people who've already decided not to listen. Stoic men don't do that. They act with intention, not emotion. Their unpredictability isn't random, it's measured. When you send a message like, "You know what? Never mind." It's not a trick. It's a mirror. It reflects their own indifference back at them. You're saying, without saying, if you're not invested, I won't force connection. That's emotional intelligence at its peak. It's not silence out of spite, it's silence out of self-respect. And that makes people think, because when you act differently, they see you differently. You go from someone who needs closure to someone who creates mystery. You become the question they can't answer. Here's what happens next. They'll replay your message in their mind. They'll check your profile, your stories, your last scene. They'll start asking themselves, why did they change? Did I do something wrong? Who are they talking to now? And that's when the power shifts completely. You're no longer chasing, they are. You're no longer wondering if they care, they're wondering if you've moved on. The same silence that once felt like rejection now becomes your greatest weapon, because unpredictability isn't about confusion, it's about control. You're controlling the one thing Stoics value most, your response. The takeaway: unpredictability doesn't mean chaos. It means mastery over emotion. It means learning to express less and impact more, because the more predictable you are, the less you're felt. But when your actions are calm, precise, and unexpected, you become unforgettable. Remember, the goal isn't to make them chase. The goal is to remind yourself that you don't need to. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe consistency to those who don't respect it. You owe yourself peace and the freedom to walk away whenever you choose. Because a Stoic man doesn't seek to be understood, he seeks to be aligned. And when your actions align with your self-respect, unpredictability isn't a strategy. It's your natural state. So the next time they think they've got you figured out, smile, stay silent, and let your unpredictability remind them that the man they once ignored is now the one they can't stop thinking about. Let's be honest, nothing is harder than staying calm when you feel ignored. You start to overthink. Replay every word you said, every emoji you sent, every moment that might have changed the energy. You feel that storm rising inside you, the urge to reach out. to fix, to ask what happened. But the truth is simple. Every time you break your calm to seek attention, you give away your crown. A high-value man doesn't beg to be seen. He understands one of the most powerful Stoic principles. You can't control what others do. You can only control how you respond. That's where the cool detachment begins, when you stop reacting out of insecurity and start responding with discipline. Calm is not weakness, it's control. There's a difference between indifference and detachment. Indifference says, I don't care. Detachment says, I care, but not at the expense of my peace. And that difference changes everything. When someone doesn't reply, most people assume silence means rejection. So they panic. They overcompensate. They rush to fill the void. But when you stay calm, when you don't chase, you show them something rare. You show that you value your energy. You show that your world doesn't collapse because one person went quiet. And that confidence, it's magnetic. People are drawn to those who remain centered while everyone else loses control. Because calmness is power. It's a sign that your emotions serve you, not the other way around. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Freedom begins when you can sit in uncertainty and still breathe, when you can wait without fear, when you can stay silent and still know your worth. That's the essence of detachment. The art of matching energy. Detachment doesn't mean ignoring others. It means mirroring their investment. If they take 2 days to respond, you don't reply in 2 minutes. If they give you silence, you give them space. You match energy not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because when you stop overgiving, people start noticing your absence. They start realizing how easy it was to take your consistency for granted, and suddenly, what once felt ordinary becomes valuable again. Here's the truth. People only appreciate what's not guaranteed. And the moment your presence stops feeling guaranteed, it starts feeling important. That's why Stoic men don't over-explain. They let silence and timing do the work. They know that validation earned through chasing is temporary, but respect earned through composure lasts. Mastering the light response. When you do respond, your tone must reflect balance, calm, light, and emotionally grounded. Instead of texting, "Why didn't you reply?" you say, "No worries. I figured you were busy." It's short, graceful, confident, or even better, "I had something interesting to tell you." But it can wait. That sentence is lethal in its calmness. You're not guilt-tripping. You're not bitter. You're simply signaling that your time moves forward, with or without them. Because calm detachment doesn't scream. It whispers and still gets heard. And the more peace you project, the more they question why they ever risked losing it. The psychology of calm energy. Here's what happens on a subconscious level. When you act desperate, you trigger resistance. When you act detached, you trigger curiosity. Desperation says, "I need you to complete me." Detachment says, "I'm complete, but you're welcome to join my peace." The human mind always values what feels rare and self-sufficient. So when you project calmness, people naturally gravitate toward it. Because deep down, everyone wants what you have: emotional control. Your calm becomes a mirror that exposes their chaos. Your discipline highlights their impulsiveness. Your silence makes them feel their own noise. And before they even realize it, they're drawn back, not because you chased, but because your stability feels safe. The Stoic framework for emotional mastery. When faced with silence or rejection, remind yourself of the Stoic triad. 1. Perception. See things as they are, not worse than they are. They didn't respond. That's all. Don't turn silence into a story. 2. Action. Act according to reason, not impulse. No double texts, no emotional paragraphs, just stillness or a calm line when needed. 3. Will. Accept what's outside your control. Their reaction doesn't define your value. Your self-respect does. This mindset rewires your nervous system. Instead of anxiety, you feel composure. Instead of overthinking, you feel freedom. Because once you internalize Stoicism, detachment becomes effortless. You no longer chase attention. You cultivate presence. You no longer beg to be seen. You stand firm and let others notice. Detachment creates attraction. Here's the irony most men never realize. When you stop trying to prove your worth becomes obvious. People sense when your peace isn't negotiable. And that creates a different kind of tension, the kind rooted in respect. You're no longer fighting for approval. You're walking in alignment. You're showing that you can feel everything and still stay in control. That's rare. That's powerful. That's what women and the world respond to. So the next time someone ignores you, remember this. You're not here to convince anyone to see your value. You're here to embody it so clearly that they regret ever overlooking it. Detachment doesn't push people away. It filters out those who were never meant to stay. The calm man is unshakable. A man who masters detachment is untouchable, not because he's cold, but because he's centered. He doesn't react to every shift in someone else's mood. He doesn't panic over unanswered messages. He walks like the ocean, calm on the surface, powerful beneath. And that calm energy transforms everything. Conversations slow down. Interactions deepen. Respect replaces tension. You no longer fear losing anyone because you've already found yourself. Marcus Aurelius said it best. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's the foundation of cool detachment. Not withdrawal, not arrogance, but quiet self-command. And when you master that, you become the rarest kind of man in the modern world. The one who's not desperate for attention, because he is the attention. There's a strange thing about memory. It doesn't fade. It hides, buried beneath time, routine, and pride. It waits until something small, a scent, a song, a phrase suddenly brings it all rushing back. And in that moment, the person who once felt indifferent feels something they can't explain. That's nostalgia, and when used with grace, it becomes one of the most powerful tools of emotional reconnection. Most men, when ignored, try to force attention. They send explanations, reminders, confessions, hoping to spark interest through logic. But attraction doesn't live in logic. It lives in memory, emotion, and story. When you try to convince someone to care, they resist. But when you remind them of what it felt like to care, they soften. Because nostalgia doesn't push, it pulls. Why nostalgia works? When someone ignores you, their mind often rationalizes it. They'll move on. They weren't that special. They'll text someone else. But when you awaken a shared memory, something simple yet emotionally vivid, you bypass logic and touch their heart directly. You remind them of the version of themselves that laughed with you, trusted you, or simply felt at peace in your presence. It's not manipulation, it's recognition. You're not trying to reopen the past. You're reminding them it existed. And sometimes, that's enough to melt the emotional distance they've built. Seneca once said, "Memory is the treasury and guardian of all things." Use that treasury wisely. How to reignite the connection? Imagine sending this message: "Just remembered that afternoon when we got lost and ended up finding that random cafe. Still one of my favorite days." That line does three things at once. 1, it triggers a sensory memory: smell, laughter, color. 2, it reminds them of a moment of connection, not confrontation. 3, it repositions you as someone who remembers with calm appreciation, not need. Notice what's missing. There's no question. No, do you remember? No. How have you been? Just presence. You're offering a memory, not requesting attention. And that's the key. Nostalgia must come from a place of peace, not pain. When your tone is calm, warm, and grounded, it reframes you as emotionally mature, someone who values the experience, not the outcome. The psychology behind it. Psychologically, nostalgia acts as an emotional bridge. It reminds people of a time when things felt right, and even if they've convinced themselves they've moved on, the body remembers. The mind remembers. When you send a message rooted in nostalgia, you trigger dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and comfort. And that chemical, linked to your memory, makes them feel safe with you again. That's why you never use nostalgia to guilt or provoke. You use it to reawaken familiarity. Because deep connection isn't built through tension, it's built through recognition. Examples of Stoic nostalgia in practice. You can use nostalgia in subtle, elegant ways that align perfectly with Stoic composure. Example 1. I walked past that street where we once got caught in the rain. Still can't believe how hard we laughed. Simple, peaceful, present. It doesn't scream, "Come back." It whispers, "Remember." Example 2. Saw that coffee brand you always used to buy. You clearly converted me. I still drink it. This message conveys emotional depth without emotional pressure. It honors the connection without clinging to it. Example 3. Funny how certain songs never sound the same once you associate them with a person. This one's poetic, vague, yet emotionally charged. It invites thought, not confrontation. It opens a mental loop that can last hours. The magic of nostalgia lies in its restraint. You never say, "I miss you." You let the memory say it for you. Why it aligns with Stoicism. Stoicism teaches emotional mastery, not suppression, but governance. When you send a nostalgic message calmly, you demonstrate power over emotion, not the absence of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "To love only what happens, what was destined, no greater harmony." In other words, you don't fight the past. You honor it. You let it live where it belongs, in memory. That's what separates a Stoic man from a reactive one. A reactive man uses nostalgia to reopen wounds. A Stoic man uses nostalgia to reflect light, to show gratitude, not grief. So your tone matters more than your words.